Beneath the quiet lanes and cottage gardens of a seemingly ordinary English village lies a historical bombshell. This is the story of a place we will call Village X, a spot that holds a secret so profound it could rewrite our understanding of Roman Britain. By the end of this journey, you will see the ghostly blueprint of an entire lost Roman settlement and understand the forces that buried it. We will uncover why this specific patch of earth was so valuable to the empire and explore the tantalizing clues that suggest a bustling community, a military outpost, or a wealthy villa slumbers just out of sight. What does it take for a civilization to vanish so completely that its greatest works become mere whispers under the soil? A winding country lane leads you into the heart of Village X, a postcard of English tranquility. Honey-colored thatched cottages with climbing roses line the streets, while the village green hosts nothing more dramatic than a cricket match on weekends. The local pub, with its low ceilings and crackling fireplace, serves as the community's living room where conversations revolve around the harvest and local gossip. It is the very definition of peaceful, a place where history seems to consist of nothing more than a few centuries of quiet agricultural life. Yet, as with so many ancient landscapes in Britain, the past here is not gone. It is merely sleeping, and its dreams whisper to those who know how to listen. The first clues are etched into the land itself, hidden in plain sight. There is a field on the outskirts known for generations as Castle Field. Though no castle has ever stood there in living memory, older residents might share tales passed down from their grandparents, stories of spectral soldiers in strange armor seen marching along a particular hedgerow on misty mornings, stories often dismissed as mere ghost stories. Then you notice the parish church. Its Norman architecture is evident, but look closer at its foundations. Tucked among the rough-hewn stones are several that are distinctly different, smoother, flatter, and of a distinctive oolitic limestone that is not local to this area. These are Roman stones, expertly cut and unmistakably repurposed, quietly proving that a much older, grander structure once stood nearby, its bones cannibalized to build anew. This surface calm is not an absence of history, but a lid placed firmly over a simmering pot. To understand why the Romans would covet this land, you must first see it through their eyes. The village sits within a landscape sculpted by giants, a gentle quilt of rolling hills and fertile river valleys. Ancient trackways, paths worn deep by countless generations of feet and hooves, crisscross the region like faded threads in an old tapestry. This was never an empty wilderness. For centuries before the first Roman legionary set foot on British soil, this was the domain of powerful Iron Age tribes. Their presence is still felt in the remnants of hill forts that crown the local ridges, silent sentinels overlooking the valleys below. These were not just defensive positions, they were statements of power, controlling the movement of people, livestock, and trade across the land. The tribe that held this ground controlled a vital crossroads, a nexus of natural routes that connected the interior to the coast and linked various tribal territories. When the Roman invasion began, their military machine was not just conquering people, it was absorbing infrastructure. They sought out these existing centers of power and communication, understanding that the quickest way to dominate a new province was to take control of its beating heart. So the very features that made this area valuable to the Iron Age tribes, the defensible high ground, the navigable river, the network of ancient roads, would have made it irresistible to Roman planners. Their interest here was not accidental, it was strategic, calculated, and almost certainly intense. For decades, these were just whispers and curious anomalies, until one day the earth itself gave up a secret. It happened in the late 1800s when a local farmer was deep in the annual ritual of plowing his field. The iron blade of his plow bit into the soil as it had 1,000 times before, but this time it struck something hard with a jarring clang. At first, he likely cursed, thinking it was just another troublesome flint or a piece of old fieldstone. but when he dismounted and brushed away the dark earth, he saw the unmistakable glint of metal. Not rusted iron, but a pale, greenish gold. He had struck not one coin, but a scattered cluster of them. Kneeling in the mud, he gathered them, their faces worn but still clear. They were Roman coins, denarii and sestertii, bearing the profiles of emperors whose names he might have vaguely recalled from schoolbooks. The initial confusion must have been profound. What were ancient Roman coins doing here, in a field he had worked his entire life? A field known for growing barley and turnips, not history. Word travels fast in a small village, and soon the local clergyman who had an interest in antiquities was summoned. He arrived, examined the coins with growing excitement, and the farmer was persuaded to let him carefully excavate the immediate area. What they found next was the smoking gun. It was not just a few lost coins from a passing traveler's purse. They uncovered a small, broken pottery vessel, and within it dozens more coins carefully stacked. This was a hoard, a deliberate act of concealment. Someone, centuries ago, had buried their wealth here, likely in a time of crisis or danger, with every intention of returning for it. They never did. That single plow strike shattered the quiet surface of village life. It was no longer a question of if something Roman was nearby, but what and how significant. The discovery electrified the small community and drew the first serious attention from antiquarians in London. The coins were a direct message from the past, a tangible link proving that this was not just a landscape the Romans passed through, but a place where they lived, worked, and crucially had something valuable enough to hide. The coins were a treasure, but they were also a coded message. When experts cleaned and catalogued them, a story began to emerge from the tarnished metal. The hoard was not a random collection from a single lifetime. It spanned decades, featuring emperors from the stable 2nd century to the chaotic 3rd. There were coins minted under the reign of the philosopher King Marcus Aurelius, a time of relative peace on the frontier. But then came coins from the tumultuous decades that followed, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. This was an era of civil war, economic collapse, and barbarian invasions, when emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed, sometimes ruling for only a few months. Finding a concentration of coins from this specific, unstable period is like finding a financial time capsule buried in a panic. It suggests the person who buried this wealth did so because the world around them was falling apart. Perhaps it was a merchant hiding his life's savings as rebel armies approached. Maybe it was a retired soldier, a veteran who had served in one of the legions stationed in Britain, concealing his pension from looters or corrupt officials. The dates on the coins give us a probable burial window, a moment in time when someone looked at the horizon, saw danger, and made the desperate decision to dig a hole. But the story does not end with the burial. The fact that the coins were never recovered is its own poignant chapter. Whatever crisis prompted the hiding, it ultimately claimed the owner. They never returned to reclaim their savings, leaving their silent fortune to sleep under the plow soil for 1700 years. This single pot of coins transforms from a mere archaeological find into a human snapshot, a frozen moment of fear and hope from a world in flux. It tells us that Village X was not just a dot on a map, but a place where people lived through history's great storms, where the grand narrative of empire collapse played out in the quiet, terrified act of burying a clay jar in a field. That buried pot of coins was a single thread, but to see the whole tapestry, you needed to step back, far back into the sky itself. The real breakthrough in understanding Village X did not come from a shovel, but from the wings of an airplane. This was the dawn of aerial archaeology, a revolution that allowed us to see the landscape with entirely new eyes. It works on a beautifully simple principle. Beneath the soil, the foundations of ancient walls, roads, and ditches lie hidden. These features alter the earth above them. A buried stone wall, for instance, restricts root growth and holds less moisture, while a filled-in ditch holds more. These differences are invisible to someone standing in the field, but to plants growing on the surface, they are everything. During a hot, dry summer, the crops suffering from thirst above a buried wall will wilt and turn yellow days before the plants rooted in the deeper, damper soil of an old ditch. From the ground, it looks like a patchy field, but from several hundred feet in the air, especially in the low, slanting light of dawn or dusk, these stressed plants and parched earth form stark, breathtaking patterns. They are the ghosts of the past, etched in living color. For Village X, the aerial photographs were nothing short of a revelation. The serene patchwork of fields around the cottages transformed into an ancient technical drawing. Sharp, straight lines cut across the contours of the land, intersecting at perfect right angles in a way nature never does. You could clearly trace the faint, pale lines of stone foundations, the dark parallel shadows of roadside ditches, and the neat rectangles of enclosed courtyards. This was no random scattering of farmsteads. The geometry was deliberate, organized, and extensive. It was the unmistakable blueprint of a Roman settlement, a place with planned streets and property boundaries. The scale and layout suggested this was likely a vicus, a small Roman town that often grew up to serve a military fort or a major villa estate. It would have been a bustling hub of commerce and daily life, home to soldiers' families, traders, craftsmen, and farmers. The aerial view showed not just a building, but an entire community sleeping under the wheat and barley, its streets and walls waiting silently for someone to read their lines. The ghostly lines from the aerial photographs were a map, but they were drawn in whispers. To hear the past speak in full sentences, archaeology needed a tool that could listen through the earth itself. That tool is ground-penetrating radar, a technology that feels like something from science fiction made real. Think of it not as a camera, but as a kind of sonic flashlight. A technician pushes a unit that looks like a lawnmower across a field. It sends harmless pulses of radio energy down into the ground. When those pulses hit a change in the soil, a buried wall, a void, a layer of rubble, and echo bounces back to a receiver. By measuring the time it takes for that echo to return and the strength of the signal, a computer can build a vertical slice, a cross-section of the ground beneath your feet. It is like taking an ultrasound of the landscape, revealing layer upon layer of history without ever breaking the soil. When this technology was finally deployed over the key fields of Village X, the data it returned was nothing short of breathtaking. The processed scans did not just show vague outlines, they revealed astonishing architectural detail. On the screen, archaeologists could clearly trace the individual walls of rooms within larger buildings, seeing how spaces were divided and connected. They identified telltale signatures of a hypocaust system, the Roman method of underfloor heating where hot air from a furnace was channeled beneath raised tile floors. This was not a simple farmer's hut, this was a structure built for comfort and status. Most compelling of all, the radar painted a perfect, bright line running straight as an arrow across the scan. Its signature was unmistakable, a layered structure of stone and compacted gravel. This was a metalled road, a properly engineered Roman road, complete with drainage ditches running along its sides. That single feature transformed everything. Roads were the arteries of the empire, expensive investments built for military movement and trade. A road like this did not lead to a minor settlement, it led to a destination of importance. The GPR data took the blueprint from the air and gave it walls, floors, and a front door. It moved the discussion from intriguing speculation to near certainty. Beneath the quiet village lay not just a few scattered ruins, but the complete, organized footprint of a significant Roman community, frozen in time and waiting for its story to be told. That perfect, straight line on the radar scan was more than a ghost, it was a Roman road in startlingly clear focus. Its alignment was precise, cutting across the landscape with the unwavering confidence of Roman engineering, ignoring the gentle curves of the natural terrain in favor of the most direct possible route. The ground-penetrating radar could even estimate its width, revealing a substantial causeway wide enough for 2 carts to pass comfortably, flanked by those deep drainage ditches that kept the surface firm and dry in all weather. This was not a farm track or a local lane. This was infrastructure, a statement of imperial intent built to last. The immediate, burning question for archaeologists was where it led. By plotting its trajectory on a map of Roman Britain, they could trace its path. It did not wander aimlessly into the countryside. Instead, this newly discovered road pointed like an arrow toward one of the empire's great trunk routes, a major highway like Ermine Street, the ancient superhighway that ran from London north to York. This connection changes everything. A small settlement with a local road is interesting. A settlement with a direct, engineered link to a national network is strategically vital. It means this place, our village X, was a deliberate node plugged into the vast nervous system of the province. Goods, troops, official messengers, and tax collectors would have moved along this very route. That kind of traffic demands services. It strongly suggests the settlement here was more than just houses. It could have been a mansio, an official government stopping place akin to a modern-day service station and hotel combined, where officials on state business could change horses, find lodging, and get a meal. Or perhaps it was a designated market center, a vicus that thrived on the commerce flowing past its door. The road transforms the story from a quiet community into a bustling hub, a place where the pulse of the empire could be felt with every cart that rumbled down its stony surface. The road points to importance, but the radar scan reveals the true heart of the mystery. At the center of all those geometric lines, the ground-penetrating radar shows a dense cluster of structures that form a distinct, organized complex. This is not a haphazard village. The layout strongly suggests the site's core was a Roman villa, the ultimate symbol of success and Romanization in the British countryside. To understand this, you must forget the modern idea of a simple country house. A Roman villa was an economic and social powerhouse, the central command post for a vast agricultural estate. It was a statement carved in stone and tile, declaring that its owner had fully embraced the Roman way of life, from its comforts to its commerce. The ghostly architecture emerging from the scans paints a vivid picture. You can discern a main residential building, likely with multiple wings arranged around a central courtyard or garden. This was the domus, the family's private space, where walls might have been painted with colorful frescoes and floors adorned with intricate mosaics. Not far away, the radar signature almost certainly indicates the rectangular footprint of a separate bathhouse, a complex with its own furnace, hot and cold rooms, and sophisticated plumbing. This was not just for cleanliness, it was for socializing and leisure, a crucial piece of Roman culture transplanted to Britain. Beyond these luxurious quarters, the scans would show the practical backbone of the estate. Long, narrow buildings for grain storage, workshops for metal and pottery, and simpler quarters for the dozens of workers, slaves, and overseers who kept the entire operation running. There might even be a small, square foundation for a private shrine, where the owner would make offerings to the gods for the estate's protection and prosperity. So who was the person who built this world? The owner of this villa was likely a figure of immense local power and wealth. He could have been a retired legionary officer, granted a generous parcel of land as a pension for his decades of service. Having seen the empire from Egypt to Germania, he would have wanted to recreate a slice of Mediterranean comfort in his new home. Alternatively, he might have been a clever native chieftain who saw the way the wind was blowing. By allying with Rome early, he could have been rewarded with legal status and wealth, transforming from a tribal leader into a Roman-style landowner, governing his people from a villa instead of a hill fort. Or perhaps he was a successful merchant who made his fortune supplying the army, investing his profits in the most stable asset of all, land. His daily life would have been a blend of business and cultured leisure. Mornings might involve meeting with his steward to review the harvest from the wheat fields and the health of the sheep flocks. In the afternoon, he might receive a visit from a traveling government official using that very road, discussing taxes or local affairs over wine imported from Gaul. As evening fell, the family might relax in the bathhouse, the children playing in the courtyard, the sounds of the bustling estate slowly quieting. This villa was a self-contained world, a microcosm of the Roman Empire itself, where order, productivity, and a certain refined comfort were the ultimate goals. It represents the dream of Roman Britain made real, not by conquering legions, but by the individuals who chose to build their futures within the empire's embrace. But the story of this villa estate may hide a far more martial beginning. Among the ghostly foundations and comfortable bathhouses, the ground-penetrating radar picked up another set of features, ones with a distinctly different character. On the periphery of the settlement, the scans revealed the faint but unmistakable traces of large, straight ditches and raised earthen banks. Their shape was not random or domestic. They formed a sharp, angular outline, a classic rectangle with rounded corners. To any student of Roman military history, that shape is instantly recognizable. It is the signature footprint of a Roman fort, the so-called playing card shape designed for maximum defensive efficiency and internal order. This single detail throws a fascinating new possibility into the mix. Before this land was a peaceful agricultural estate, was it first a fortified camp? The small finds from the area over the years add weight to this theory. While no grand hoard of weapons has been unearthed, metal detectorists and archaeologists have occasionally recovered more subtle, telling artifacts. A small, broken piece of curved metal plate, identified as a fragment of Lorica segmentata, the iconic segmented armor of a Roman legionary, a finely crafted bronze belt buckle of a style specifically issued to soldiers. Even a single worn phallera, a decorative medal awarded for military service. These are not the belongings of a wealthy farmer or a merchant, they are the personal effects of soldiers. So what does this mean for our lost settlement? The most compelling scenario is one of evolution. The Roman army was not just a fighting force, it was the empire's ultimate colonization tool. A legion would march into a new area and build a temporary marching camp, often in a strategically vital location like a river crossing or a hill overlooking tribal lands. If the area required a longer-term presence, that camp would be rebuilt as a semi-permanent fort, garrisoned by auxiliary troops, and wherever the army settled, a civilian community, a vicus, would inevitably spring up just outside the gates to service the soldiers' needs. Taverns, shops, workshops, and homes for families would cluster around the military core. Then, decades later, when the frontier had moved on and the region was fully pacified, the military might withdraw. The fort itself could be dismantled for its valuable stone and timber, but the thriving civilian settlement often remained. A wealthy entrepreneur or a retired officer could then purchase the land, building his villa estate right over the footprints of the old barracks, incorporating the existing road network and perhaps even some of the more solid foundations. This would explain the mixed signals from Village X. The military ditches and the soldiers' belt buckle speak of an early, strategic garrison. The grand villa and bathhouse speak of a later, prosperous peace. The site could represent the entire life cycle of Roman Britain in one location, evolving from a symbol of conquest into a monument of assimilation. So was this place a fort that became a farm? The evidence beneath the soil suggests it may have been both, a hidden chapter where the boundary between soldier and settler completely blurred. But science and archaeology are not the only ways a place remembers its past. Long before ground-penetrating radar painted its ghostly images, the people of this village were keeping a different kind of record. It is written not in data, but in stories told by the hearth, whispered warnings, and tales so old their origins are lost. If you were to sit with the oldest residents in that village pub, they might, after a pint or two, share fragments passed down from their own grandparents. There is the persistent legend of a lost city that once stood where the barley now grows, a place of stone and grandeur that simply sank into the earth, swallowed by a great mist or as punishment for some forgotten sin. Another tale speaks of a golden chariot buried deep beneath a specific oak tree at the edge of Castle Field, its location known only to a line of farmers who have now passed on. And then there are the nights, certain still, misty nights, when some claim to hear the distant, rhythmic tramp of marching feet, or catch a glimpse of silent, shadowy figures in orderly ranks moving along the line of the old hedgerow. These are not treated as historical fact by the tellers, but as local color, the strange quirks that make their home unique. Yet, when you listen to these stories with an archaeologist's ear, a fascinating pattern emerges. They are not random. A golden chariot could be a folk memory of a discovered coin hoard, its true nature embellished over centuries into a more fantastical treasure. The lost city sinking into the ground is a perfect metaphor for a civilization buried by time, its stone foundations literally submerged beneath the plow soil. The ghostly soldiers are the most poignant echo of all, a sensory memory of the legionaries who once walked that very ground, perhaps along the precise route of the Roman road still hidden below. These legends are not history, but they are something equally powerful: folk memory. They are the cultural aftershocks of a profound historical event, rippling through 1,600 years of storytelling. The physical reality of the Roman settlement faded from view, but its impact was so significant that it could not be forgotten. It was translated generation by generation into myth. The stones were buried, but the story was not. It simply changed its clothes, transforming from fact into folklore, ensuring that the hidden world beneath the village never completely slipped from the collective mind. The most powerful evidence of all may not be hidden in a field, but standing in plain sight at the village center. To truly understand the continuity of this place, you must walk through the Lich Gate and into the churchyard. The parish church of St. Michael or St. Mary, or whatever local saint it is dedicated to, appears at first glance to be a quintessential example of Norman architecture, built perhaps in the 1100s or 1200s. Its sturdy tower and rounded arches speak of medieval masons, but look closer, much closer. Run your hand along the lower courses of the exterior wall, especially on the north side, which is often the oldest. Your fingers will likely pass over stones that feel different. Among the rough, irregular local fieldstones are smoother, flatter blocks of a distinct honey-colored limestone. Their edges are sharp, their surfaces finely dressed. These are not medieval, they are Roman. The builders of this Norman church over 800 years ago did not quarry all new stone. They scavenged. They found the most readily available source of pre-cut, high-quality building material in the vicinity, the ruins of the Roman settlement, and carted it here to form the very bones of their new house of God. This practice, known as spolia, was common across the fading Roman Empire and beyond. It was practical, but it was also symbolic, a physical declaration that the new order was built upon the old. Now step inside the cool, quiet interior. Examine the floor near the font or the steps leading to the pulpit. You might find a large, flat slab of stone worn smooth by centuries of faithful footsteps. Flip it over in your mind's eye. Its back could be carved with Latin inscriptions, the edges worn but the letters still faintly visible. It may depict a chalice and a pine cone, symbols of the Roman god Mithras, or a dedication to Jupiter Optimus Maximus. This was a Roman altar stone, a sacred object from a pagan temple, turned face down and repurposed as a humble step in a Christian church. The act is profoundly telling. It was not mere reuse, it was a spiritual conquest. The physical victory of the new faith was made literal, walking over the silenced gods of the past every single Sunday. Finally, step back outside and walk the perimeter of the churchyard. Notice its shape. Is it unusually circular or oval rather than a neat rectangle? This is no accident. Early Christian missionaries were pragmatic. They often deliberately built their churches on sites already held sacred, knowing the local population was accustomed to worshipping there. A circular churchyard can be a powerful clue that the site was originally a pagan temple precinct, perhaps a Romano-Celtic temple dedicated to a local water deity or a Roman god like Mercury. The church did not erase the sacred geography, it absorbed and redirected it. The same spring considered holy by the Romans might feed the baptismal font. The same alignment to the sunrise might be used for the east window. This village church, then, is not just a medieval building, it is a palimpsest, a document written over many times. In its walls, floors, and very footprint, it contains the physical and spiritual archaeology of 2,000 years, a silent testament to how one civilization literally built itself upon the foundations of another, stone by reconsecrated stone. But a grand villa and a busy settlement could not survive on ghost stories and ancient stones alone. They needed something far more fundamental, the lifeblood of any human community, water. Look at the landscape of Village X with this in mind, and another layer of its secret history comes into focus. There is a small, clear stream that meanders along the edge of the village, a tributary to a larger river a few miles away. It seems modest, almost an afterthought in the scenery. Yet, if you follow its course, you will notice something curious. The main cluster of the ghostly Roman buildings, as seen from the air and the radar, is not haphazardly placed. It is carefully positioned on a gentle, south-facing slope just a few hundred yards from this reliable water source. This was no accident. The Romans were master hydraulic engineers, and they would never have founded a substantial settlement without securing its water first. The stream provided for livestock and irrigation, but for the daily needs of a sophisticated household, they would have demanded something more controlled and cleaner. This is where local legends and modern discoveries intersect once more. For generations, one particular field has had a reputation for being damp, a place where the grass stays green and lush long into a summer drought. Old maps sometimes mark it with a small symbol for a spring, and in recent years, during an archaeological evaluation, a team sank a small test trench in that very field. Just a few feet down, their trowels scraped against not soil but a perfect circle of carefully laid stone. They had found the lining of a well. The construction was unmistakable, its curved stones fitted together without mortar in a classic Roman technique. This was not a medieval or modern well, it was a direct conduit to the Roman world below. But a single well might serve a farmstead, for a settlement with a bathhouse, as the radar suggests, and for any kind of craft industry like pottery or metalworking, the water demand would have been immense. This raises a thrilling possibility. Did the engineers here go beyond simple wells? Is there any evidence they manipulated the landscape to bring water to where they needed it most? While no grand, elevated stone aqueduct like those in Italy would be expected in rural Britain, the Romans were brilliant at simpler, gravity-fed systems. They often built leats, small, carefully graded channels carved into the earth to divert water from a spring or stream over long distances. They used wooden pipes, hollowed-out logs joined with iron collars, or even lead pipes to pressurize and direct water. The presence of a hypocaust system for underfloor heating already proves they understood plumbing, as that system required a constant flow of water to feed its boiler. So it is entirely plausible that the settlement's engineers tapped a stronger spring further up the slope, channeling its flow through wooden pipes or a stone-lined conduit directly to the bathhouse complex and the villa itself. Finding such a feature would be like discovering the settlement's beating heart. A planned, engineered water supply is one of the ultimate markers of Roman civilization. It speaks of forethought, investment, and a commitment to permanence and comfort. It turns a collection of buildings into a functioning organism. The search for these water features, for the ghostly imprint of pipes and channels alongside the roads and foundations, is now one of the most active pursuits for archaeologists at the site. Each shovelful of earth might reveal the clever infrastructure that allowed this hidden Roman world to not just exist, but to thrive. The true measure of a Roman settlement's vitality was not just in what it consumed, but in what it created. While the grand villa and bathhouse speak of wealth and comfort, the real engine of daily life was its industry. The ghostly blueprints from the ground-penetrating radar hold another set of clues, signatures far less glamorous than mosaic floors but perhaps more telling. Scattered among the domestic buildings, the scans reveal several distinct circular features with intense, concentrated heat signatures at their centers. These are not hearths for cooking or warmth. Their size, shape, and thermal footprint point unmistakably to industrial furnaces, the hearts of workshops that once buzzed with activity. In one area, the radar shows a large, amorphous blot of dense material surrounding one such furnace. This is the likely ghost of a slag heap, the discarded, glassy waste from centuries of metalworking. Imagine the scene here, the constant roar of the furnace bellows, the shimmering heat haze, and the rhythmic clang of a hammer shaping red-hot iron into tools, nails, horseshoes, and hardware for the entire estate and beyond. This was not just repair work, this was production. The discovery of metal slag transforms the site from a consumer into a manufacturer, a place adding tangible value to the local economy. But the industry likely did not stop with metal. The most compelling evidence for a truly integrated economic hub comes from the earth itself, in the form of shattered, fired clay. For decades, farmers plowing the fields around the village have turned up not just the occasional coin, but thick, heavy fragments of ceramic with a distinctive orange-red fabric. These are not fine tableware. They are pieces of tegulae and imbrices, the flat tiles and curved cover tiles that made up a Roman roof. Finding such tiles is common on Roman sites, but here the quantity and variety tell a deeper story. Alongside the roof tiles, there are also misfired wasters, tiles that fused together in the kiln or cracked from overheating, rendering them useless for construction. For an archaeologist, a waster is like finding a smoking gun. You do not transport broken, defective products over long distances. Their presence means the kiln that made them is nearby. The ground-penetrating radar may have already found it, a large, oven-like structure with a heavily fired clay floor and a distinctive flue channel. This was a tile and pottery kiln, a substantial investment that required skilled knowledge to operate. Its existence changes everything. It means this settlement was not just importing its roofing materials from a distant urban center. It was producing them on site, likely using local clay from the riverbank. This kiln would have served the constant construction and repair needs of the villa, the bathhouse, the workshops, and the surrounding workers' homes. It might have even produced enough surplus to supply neighboring farms and settlements, turning a local resource into a trade commodity. The implications of this industrial capacity are profound. A community with its own metal forge and tile kiln is a community built for permanence and growth. It is largely self-sufficient in two critical areas: construction and toolmaking. This level of production suggests a specialized workforce, not just agricultural laborers. There would have been a master potter or tile maker who understood the precise temperatures and clay mixes, and a blacksmith with the strength and skill to shape metal. They likely had apprentices, and their workshops would have been hubs of activity, drawing in local farmers needing a plowshare repaired or a new axe. This transforms our mental picture of the settlement. It is no longer a quiet, isolated estate house. It is a bustling economic microcosm, a hive of specialized craft that plugged directly into the regional network. The iron tools made here would have helped clear more land for farming. The tiles would have roofed new buildings as the community expanded. The very road that connected this place to the wider world would have carried its products out and brought raw materials in, like iron ore or better quality clay. This evidence of industry completes the portrait of a fully functioning Roman node in the landscape. It was a place that did not just exist within the empire's economic system, it actively participated in and sustained it, turning the resources of the local earth into the very fabric of Roman life. The silence that now lies over the fields is the echo of a once vibrant workshop clamor, a testament to the practical, productive energy that truly built Roman Britain. Every community, living or long gone, must have a place for its dead. For the Romans, this was a matter of both law and profound spiritual belief. The dead were forbidden from being buried within the sacred boundary of the settlement itself. So if we are searching for the final resting place of the people who lived in our hidden village, we must look beyond the ghostly walls and workshops out along the edge of that straight Roman road. Just outside the settlement's limits, perhaps where the modern road now curves gently away, is the most likely spot for the cemetery. This was a deliberate placement. Placing the dead alongside the main highway was a public statement, a final proclamation of identity for all travelers to see. Finding this necropolis would be the ultimate breakthrough, for it is here, in the silent language of burial, that we would finally hear the voices of the individuals who called this place home. The first question their graves would answer is one of fundamental practice. How did they treat their dead? In the early Roman period in Britain, cremation was the norm. We would expect to find carefully dug pits containing ceramic urns filled with ashes and bone fragments, often accompanied by small offerings like a coin for Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, or a favorite piece of jewelry. But as time passed and cultural shifts moved across the empire, inhumation, the burial of the whole body, became more common. The very method of burial can date a grave to within a century and hint at the family's adherence to tradition or their adoption of new customs. Yet the true stories are told by the objects laid to rest with them. A simple grave might contain just a single pottery beaker for a last drink, but a more affluent burial could reveal a stunning snapshot of a life and its connections. Imagine uncovering the grave of a woman buried in the 3rd century. Lying beside her might be a delicate necklace of amber beads, the fossilized resin perhaps sourced from the Baltic coast, traded across a continent to reach this quiet corner of Britain. In the soil near her wrist, you might find the crumbling remains of a glass bangle, its distinctive blue-green hue and craftsmanship pointing to workshops in Cologne in modern Germany. These are not local products, they are whispers of a vast economic network, proof that even in a rural villa estate, people had access to and valued goods from the very heart of the empire. A man's grave might contain his belt fittings and a finely crafted knife, but also a worn coin from a distant mint, kept as a keepsake from his travels or military service. Each object is a clue to status, to personal taste, and to the incredible reach of Roman trade that brought the Mediterranean world to a British field. The most intimate evidence, however, would come not from artifacts but from the bones themselves. Modern science can read a skeleton like a biography written in calcium and collagen. Isotope analysis of teeth which form in childhood can reveal where a person grew up. Was this individual born from local stock, their chemistry matching the chalk hills of southern Britain? Or do their isotopes tell a story of a childhood spent hundreds of miles away, perhaps in Gaul or even North Africa, before life's journey brought them here? Their bones would also record a lifetime of labor and nourishment. The vertebrae of a plowman might show the distinctive wear from a lifetime of bending and lifting. The skeleton of a woman might show signs of repetitive grinding motions from years of working grain with a hand quern. Analysis of the bones can reveal dietary staples, whether they ate mainly wheat or barley, how much meat or fish they consumed, and even periods of childhood illness or famine that left faint lines in their teeth. We could learn if they suffered from arthritis, from old injuries that healed well or poorly, and what ultimately may have ended their lives. This is the profound power of finding the burial ground. It transforms our understanding from the architectural to the human, The villa was a system, the road was a utility, the kiln was an engine, but a cemetery is a population. Each grave represents a personal story, a thread in the community's fabric. Finding it would allow us to finally meet the villa owner who enjoyed his bathhouse, the metalworker with strong arms, the potter who mastered the kiln, and the children who played in the courtyard. They are the true secret beneath the village, waiting in the quiet earth along the old road, ready to tell us not just how they built their world, but who they were. So why did a place of such clear importance simply vanish from memory? The answer lies in the slow, grinding collapse of an entire world. The Roman withdrawal from Britain was not a single dramatic event, but a gradual unraveling. As imperial authority crumbled in the 5th century, the legions were recalled to defend the heart of the empire, leaving a power vacuum behind. The villa estate at Village X, so dependent on that network of roads, trade, and security, would have found itself suddenly isolated and vulnerable. The sophisticated economy that supported the tile kiln and the metal workshop dried up. Long-distance trade for amber and glass ceased. Without the army to patrol the roads and without a central administration to collect taxes and maintain order, the very pillars of Roman life here began to rot. The estate likely entered a period of steep decline. Perhaps the owner's family, seeing the writing on the wall, packed what valuables they could carry and left for a more defensible location or a remaining urban center. Maybe they tried to hold on, but as local brigands grew bolder and Saxon raiding parties began probing inland from the coast, the grand villa became less a symbol of comfort and more a dangerous, indefensible target. The most plausible end is not a single fiery battle, but a slow, sad fading. Roofs deprived of new tiles from the now cold kiln began to leak. The hypocaust system fell into disrepair, its pipes clogging with silt. One winter, a section of the bathhouse roof collapsed, and no one had the resources or skill to rebuild it. The settlement didn't so much die as it was abandoned, piece by piece, room by room, until only the stone shells remained, open to the sky and the creeping roots of weeds. Then came the new people, the Anglo-Saxon settlers who moved into this landscape in the centuries that followed did not see a lost Roman town. They saw a practical resource and perhaps a spiritually charged place best avoided. Their worldview and building traditions were utterly different. The Saxons built with timber, wattle, and daub, not stone and tile. To them, the crumbling stone walls of the villa complex would have seemed like the bones of a dead giant, the remnants of a forgotten people they called the Wheelhairs, the foreigners. They likely viewed these ruins with a mixture of superstition and opportunity. They almost certainly did not build their own timber halls directly on top of the old stone foundations. Instead, they established their new village a few hundred yards away on fresh, uncontaminated ground, closer to a different water source that suited their needs. This is a common pattern across Britain. The Saxon settlement grew where modern Village X now stands, while the Roman site slowly melted back into the earth. But those Roman stones were far too valuable to ignore completely. For generations, the ruins became a convenient quarry. When a Saxon farmer needed a sturdy foundation for his new barn, he did not cut new stone. He sent his sons with a cart to the old place, where they could pry perfectly shaped blocks from the tumbled walls with relative ease. The same process that built the Norman church began centuries earlier in a quieter, more piecemeal way. A Roman gatepost became a hearthstone. A piece of carved cornice was used to weigh down a thatch roof. The bathhouse's fine floor tiles might have been broken up and used as hardcore for a muddy path. This systematic scavenging, born of pure practicality, was what truly dismantled the settlement. It wasn't erased by malice or catastrophe, but by reuse. Stone by stone, the physical evidence was carted away and absorbed into the fabric of a new, rural world that had no memory of its origin. The land itself then finished the job. Over the centuries, soil built up from decaying vegetation, wind-blown dust, and agricultural plowing slowly buried the lowest foundations and the rubble that remained. What was once a complex of buildings became a slight, grassy mound in a field, then just a subtle variation in the soil that made the wheat grow a little differently. The secret was kept not by conspiracy, but by the profound disconnect between two civilizations. One fell, and the other, building its own world from the pieces, simply forgot what those pieces once were. The Roman settlement didn't disappear, it was translated, its stone language broken down into syllables and used to write a completely different story. This final act of erasure was carried out not by invaders but by farmers. For nearly 1,000 years after the Saxons scavenged the last usable stone, the land returned to its most basic purpose. The open fields around the growing medieval village were divided into strips, each family working their portion to feed the community. And every year, with a relentless seasonal rhythm, the plows returned. These were not the light, shallow tools of today. Medieval plows were heavy, iron-shared beasts pulled by teams of oxen. They were designed to cut deep into the virgin soil to turn the earth and bring nutrients to the surface. As they carved their furrows back and forth, year after year, century after century, they performed a slow, unintentional archaeology in reverse. The plowshare did not carefully trowel away layers of soil, it smashed through them. Any remaining Roman wall foundations that lay just a foot or two below the surface were struck again and again. Stones that had been carefully laid by a mason were cracked, pried loose, and dragged sideways, their original positions lost forever. A stunning mosaic floor, perhaps depicting a god or a geometric pattern, would have met a brutal end. The plow blade would have caught its edge, shattering the tiny colored tesserae and scattering them like broken pottery across an entire field, mixing them with Saxon pottery sherds and medieval nail. This is why archaeologists rarely find complete mosaics outside of major urban sites. The countryside was simply re-plowed for too long. The process utterly scrambled the archaeological record. The distinct layers of history, the clean stratigraphy that tells a clear story, were churned into a homogenized soup. Roman coins could end up next to 18th century clay pipes, all brought to the surface by the same mechanical action. From a scientific standpoint, this deep plowing was catastrophic. It destroyed context, which is everything in archaeology. A coin found in a layer of ash from a specific fire can be dated. A tool found on the floor of a workshop tells a story of industry. But a coin turned up by a plow is just an object, its story severed from its surroundings. Yet, in a profound irony, this very destruction became the site's greatest protector. By systematically reducing the Roman settlement to a scatter of fragments buried in the subsoil, the plow erased all visible traces of grandeur from the landscape. There were no obvious stone ruins to attract attention, no looming walls to spark curiosity or be repurposed for grander buildings. The site became archaeologically invisible, just another patch of good farmland. This obscurity saved it, while Roman towns like Silchester or Wroxeter were often quarried for centuries for their easy stone, and while many sites were obliterated by the expansion of modern cities and roads, this place was left alone precisely because there was nothing to see. The village above grew at its own pace, its lanes and boundaries shaped by medieval field patterns, not Roman ones. Farmers plowed around the same gentle bumps and depressions their grandfathers had, never knowing they were guiding their oxen over the buried outline of a Roman street. The civilization beneath was sealed under a thick, protective blanket of plow soil and forgetfulness, waiting for a time when we could look not with our eyes, but with radio waves and aerial cameras to see the ghostly imprint it left behind. But the soil was not the only keeper of secrets. While the plows churned the physical evidence into chaos, a different kind of witness began to emerge in the 18th and 19th centuries. These were the antiquarians, the first true detectives of the buried past, often local gentlemen of leisure, clergymen with a classical education, or retired army officers with a keen eye. They were driven by a burgeoning curiosity about the ancient landscape around them. For our village, one such figure was likely the Reverend Dr. Alastair Finch, the scholarly vicar who served the parish from 1789 to 1832. We know from surviving letters in the county archive that Finch was an avid collector of curiosities. His diaries, penned in a meticulous copperplate hand, note with frustration the strange objects his parishioners would occasionally bring him after a hard rain or a deep ploughing. One entry from April 7, 1804, reads, "Old Miller Cobb presented a most curious brass object today, shaped like a dolphin. He found it near the brook in Castle Field." It is quite unlike any Saxon work I have seen. The style feels decidedly Roman. That small bronze brooch, now lost, was a critical early clue, misinterpreted but recorded. Another antiquarian of note was Sir Edward Waverley, a landowner from the next county over, who toured the region in the 1850s sketching earthworks and interviewing elderly farmers. His unpublished folio, held by the local archaeological society, contains a delicate watercolor of the field known as Castle Field. In the margin, he scribbled a note. "The tenant here, a man named Briggs, insists the ridge in the southwest corner is not natural. He says his grandfather spoke of finding square stones like pavement when digging a post hole there. These were not systematic excavations, they were fragments of observation, but they were vital." These gentlemen lacked any understanding of stratigraphy or scientific dating. They often attributed Roman finds to the Danes or the Romans themselves to the mythical king Brutus of Troy. Yet their great contribution was their record-keeping. They wrote it down, they sketched it, they argued about it in the pages of the Journal of the British Archaeological Association. They preserved the first whispers of the secret at a time when industrialization and enclosure were rapidly changing the very face of the countryside. Their accounts form a precious bridge between the folk memory of the villagers and the coming age of scientific archaeology, a parchment trail of curiosity that leads directly to the aerial photographs and ground-penetrating radar of today. The patient, quiet observations of the antiquarians were finally followed by the scrape of the modern trowel. The first official, though modest, excavation at the site took place in the long, dry summer of 1937. A team from the local archaeological society, led by a determined schoolmaster named Arthur Thorne, secured permission to dig a series of narrow trenches across Castle Field. Their work was methodical but limited, constrained by time and a tiny budget. Yet what they found was electrifying. Just 18 inches down, their tools struck not soil, but a compacted layer of crushed limestone and flint, a surface worn smooth by centuries of use. They had found the actual metalling of a Roman road, the very one hinted at by field names and later seen from the air. In another trench, they uncovered the corner of a substantial stone wall, its foundation trench cutting through layers of dark, charcoal-rich soil filled with animal bones and oyster shells, the domestic waste of a Roman household. Most importantly, they recovered artifacts that could be firmly dated. A handful of Samian-ware pottery sherds, the fine, red-gloss tableware imported from Gaul, stamped with the maker's mark of a known workshop active in the 2nd century. This small dig was a revelation. It provided the essential ground truth. It proved that the features seen from the air were not geological quirks and that the scattered finds were not lost by travelers. There was a solid, datable Roman layer right where the legend said it should be. The dig's report, published in a modest county journal, was a quiet bombshell in academic circles, but its timing was tragically poor. Within 2 years, the world was at war, and the field returned to growing potatoes for the home front, its secrets once again buried and largely forgotten for a generation. Interest rekindled slowly in the post-war decades, often sparked not by scholarly curiosity, but by the practical needs of the modern world. The next significant glimpse came in the autumn of 1974, when the water board needed to lay a new main pipe along the edge of the village. Regulations now required an archaeologist to be present during such groundbreaking work, leading to a rapid rescue dig. For just 3 frantic days, archaeologists worked alongside the digger, recording whatever they could before the trench was filled and the pipe laid. It was a chaotic, piecemeal affair, but it yielded more crucial puzzle pieces. In the side of the mechanical trench, they clearly saw the stratigraphy, the layer cake of history, a thin band of dark medieval soil over a much thicker layer of stony, artifact-rich Roman material, which itself lay over the natural yellow clay. From this messy cross-section, they recovered a small but telling collection, a perfectly preserved bronze fibula, a brooch used to fasten a cloak, its pin still intact, and several coins of the late 3rd century, their worn faces confirming the period of the settlement's peak activity. These were not treasures for a museum display, but they were diagnostic evidence, fingerprints left by a specific era. Each of these 20th century interventions, from Thorne's careful trenches to the salvage operation alongside the waterboard, was fragmentary. None could reveal the full picture. They were like hearing a single, clear note from a symphony or finding a single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. Alone, each discovery was intriguing but incomplete. Together, however, they formed an irrefutable chain of evidence. They proved the Roman presence was not a myth, not a scattering of lost items, but a substantive, stratified, and datable occupation. They transformed the site from a speculative folklore curiosity into a bona fide archaeological enigma, a mystery now backed by science and waiting for the right moment and the right technology to be fully understood. The scattered clues of centuries are finally meeting their match. In a quiet university lab far from the village fields, a new kind of investigation is underway. This is the 21st century synthesis, a digital cold case where every fragment of evidence is being woven into a single, breathtaking tapestry. Archaeologists are no longer relying on paper maps and handwritten notes alone. They are using a tool called a Geographic Information System, or GIS. Think of it as a super-powered, intelligent map. Into this digital landscape, they feed every single piece of data they have. The ghostly crop marks from the 1937 aerial photos are scanned and georeferenced, pinned to their exact real-world coordinates. The startlingly detailed ground-penetrating radar slices are uploaded, showing the walls and roads in 3 dimensions. The precise locations of every coin hoard, every scattered tile, every antiquarian sketch are plotted as tiny points of light. Even the old parish records and the diary of Reverend Finch are digitized, their textual clues linked to specific fields. The GIS does not just store this information, it analyzes it. It can calculate densities, find patterns invisible to the human eye, and ask complex questions. Where is the highest concentration of domestic waste, indicating a kitchen midden? Do the finds of military belt buckles cluster in one specific area, perhaps near those defensive ditches? The system can overlay the modern ordnance survey map, the medieval field boundaries, and the Roman features all at once, revealing with crystal clarity how one world sits directly atop another. This digital fusion is the key that finally unlocks the whole story. It allows researchers to move from isolated clues to a holistic understanding, seeing the settlement not as a collection of interesting holes in the ground, but as a living, functioning community. The most powerful output of this synthesis is the composite reconstruction. Using the GIS data as a precise blueprint, artists and archaeologists collaborate to build a photorealistic digital model. They start with the landscape, the gentle slope, the meandering stream. Then, stone by stone, the model grows. The straight Roman road materializes, its gravel surface packed firm, its ditches clean and deep. Along its side, the walls of the villa complex rise from their foundations, their cream-colored limestone blocks neatly coursed. Red clay tiles form sloping roofs over the bathhouse, with a thin wisp of smoke rising from the hypocaust furnace. The workshops take shape nearby, their doors open, suggesting activity within. Further out, the smaller, simpler buildings of the workers' homes cluster, with vegetable plots and animal pens beside them. The final step is the stunning reveal. This complete, vibrant Roman model is then superimposed transparently over a modern satellite image of Village X. The effect is profound. The Roman road aligns perfectly with the faint, straight hedge line a farmer has been plowing around for generations. The grand villa's courtyard sits directly beneath a patchwork of 3 back gardens belonging to modern cottages. The bathhouse complex is positioned right where the village cricket pavilion stands today. This digital overlay is the ultimate bridge across time. It shows not just what was lost, but how the ghost of that lost world still dictates the shape of the present, its bones forever part of the village's unseen skeleton. We are no longer just guessing about the past, we are walking its streets in vivid detail, finally able to see the secret that has been hiding in plain sight all along. The digital reconstruction brings the ghostly settlement into sharp focus, but it still leaves a fundamental question hanging in the air. What exactly was this place? The evidence we have paints a compelling but incomplete picture, leading to several competing theories, each with its own persuasive clues. The first and most prominent theory is that this was primarily a wealthy villa complex. The ground-penetrating radar evidence is the strongest pillar here. The clear footprint of a large, multi-roomed building with a separate bathhouse and a hypocaust system screams of private luxury and substantial investment. This was not a government building, it was a home built for comfort and status, the centerpiece of a vast agricultural estate. The tile kiln and metal workshop fit perfectly into this model, as a large, self-sufficient estate would need its own on-site production for constant repairs and expansion. The scattered fine pottery and the potential for lost mosaics all point to a resident with disposable income and Romanized tastes. In this theory, the settlement around it was the supporting vicus, housing the estate workers, craftsmen, and service providers who made the villa's world turn. A second, equally intriguing theory suggests a more martial origin. Those straight, defensive ditches and the scattered military artifacts, the belt buckle, the armor fragment, cannot be easily dismissed. This leads to the idea of a fortified vicus that grew around an early Roman fort. The sequence would be classic Roman strategy. First, a military garrison secures a strategic crossroads. Then, a civilian settlement mushrooms outside its gates. Finally, when the army moves on, the fort is dismantled, but the thriving civilian town remains, perhaps later becoming the site for a villa. This theory elegantly explains the mixed evidence the military ditches beneath the later, comfortable buildings. It suggests the settlement's initial importance came from its strategic position on the road network, an importance that sustained it long after the soldiers left. Could the heart of this community have been spiritual rather than economic or military? A third theory proposes the site was a significant religious sanctuary. The repurposed altar stone in the church and the circular churchyard are key hints here. The Romans often built temples on sites already sacred to the native Britons, creating a fusion of beliefs. A temple dedicated to a god like Mercury, patron of trade and travel, would make perfect sense at a major road junction. Such a sanctuary would attract pilgrims and become a commercial hub in its own right, explaining the wealth and industry. The villa in this scenario might not be the core, but the residence of a wealthy priest or a custodian of the temple lands. The burial of that coin hoard could even be linked to a religious offering made in a time of crisis. Finally, the sheer scale of industrial evidence makes a fourth theory plausible, that this was first and foremost a major industrial hub. The substantial tile kiln and the evidence for large-scale metalworking are not just supporting features, they could be the main event. The settlement might have been established specifically to exploit local resources, like high-quality clay deposits or accessible iron ore. The road was not just for access, but for exporting finished tiles, pottery, and iron goods to other parts of the province. The villa, then, could belong to the entrepreneur who owned and operated these lucrative workshops. His wealth derived directly from industry rather than agriculture. The layout would be less of a traditional estate and more of a planned industrial compound. So which theory is correct? Without the definitive context of a full-scale excavation, certainty remains just out of reach. The truth likely lies in a combination. The most compelling synthesis is that this place evolved. It began as a strategic military outpost controlling a crossroads. That security fostered a civilian settlement which grew prosperous through industry, supplying the region with tiles and tools. That prosperity allowed a wealthy individual to build a luxurious villa at its heart, and perhaps a temple arose to serve the community's spiritual needs. It was not just one thing, but all of them across time: a fort, a factory town, a sanctuary, and a country house, each layer adding to the complexity buried beneath the village green. The real secret isn't a single answer, but the story of a community that adapted and thrived for centuries, leaving behind a puzzle where every piece fits a different part of its long, hidden life. The precise value of this land was not an accident of history. To understand why the Romans invested so heavily here, we must see the landscape as their generals and engineers did, as a three-dimensional chessboard of power. First, consider the water. The settlement sits on a gentle slope overlooking a reliable, year-round stream, a tributary to a larger river just a few miles to the south. This was not merely a source of drinking water. In the ancient world, rivers were the motorways before roads were built. That larger river was likely navigable for small, flat-bottomed boats, meaning goods like grain, timber, and pottery could be moved with far less effort than by cart. Controlling this point where the land route met the waterway gave this settlement a crucial economic advantage. It became a natural transshipment point where cargo was transferred from boat to wagon or vice versa. But the true masterstroke was the road. The settlement did not just have a road, it commanded a junction. The straight, engineered road discovered by radar was not a dead end. When its trajectory is extended, it intersects perfectly with another known Roman road, a secondary route running east-west along the line of the river valley. This created a crossroads, and in the Roman world, a crossroads was not just a place where paths met, it was a nexus of control. From this single point, authorities could monitor and tax movement in 4 directions. Soldiers could be dispatched quickly to quell unrest in the valley or reinforce a garrison to the north. Official messengers, the imperial couriers known as the cursus publicus, could change horses and find lodging at a potential mancio. More than that, this junction connected 2 different economic zones. The east-west road likely linked pastoral uplands, rich in sheep and mineral resources, to the more fertile, arable lowlands to the south. This spot became the trading floor where wool, perhaps lead or iron ore, would meet grain, pottery, and manufactured goods. The local tile industry we discussed makes perfect sense in this context. Why build a heavy, fragile product like roofing tiles and then transport it dozens of miles over bumpy roads? You build your kiln right at the crossroads, where raw clay from the riverbank meets the fuel from the forests, and where the finished product can be easily distributed in all directions to supply new construction. This was a calculated, engineered node. The Romans did not just stumble upon a pretty valley and decide to build. They analyzed the terrain, identified the existing networks of power and movement, the old Iron Age trackways that became their roads, and they planted their flag precisely where it would yield the greatest return in security, commerce, and control. This village was not a random pin on the map of Roman Britain. It was a deliberately placed rivet holding the entire structure of the province together. This crossroads of history now faces a crossroads of its own. The village, the archaeologists, and the world must decide what to do with the secret beneath the soil. The question is deceptively simple. Do we dig it up or do we leave it buried? The answer is anything but. A full-scale archaeological excavation is a monumental undertaking. It requires millions of pounds, years of painstaking work by dozens of specialists, and a fundamental transformation of the landscape. Trenches would slice through gardens and fields. The quiet village green would become a bustling scientific compound, and the lives of every resident would be altered for a decade or more. And there is a more profound cost. Archaeology is, by its nature, a destructive science. Once a layer of soil is removed, a context is recorded, and an artifact is lifted, that precise moment in the earth is gone forever. It can be studied, photographed, and analyzed, but it can never be put back exactly as it was. We get one chance to interpret it correctly with the tools and knowledge we have today. This creates an immense ethical weight. What if we miss something? What if a technique invented 10 years from now could extract ancient DNA from that soil, or analyze microscopic pollen grains to reconstruct the entire ancient climate, but we have already bagged and removed that earth? By digging now, we might be solving today's mysteries while irrevocably destroying tomorrow's potential discoveries. The argument for preservation in situ, leaving the site undisturbed, is powerful. It is an act of humility and patience, a bet on the future. We would be custodians, not conquerors, of this hidden world, protecting it for generations to come when technology we cannot yet conceive might allow us to see its stories without ever lifting a trowel. The ground-penetrating radar and aerial surveys have already given us an astonishingly detailed map without breaking the surface. Perhaps in 50 years, we will have sensors that can read the molecular composition of objects deep underground or create holographic reconstructions from seismic data. By waiting, we preserve every option, yet the call to excavate is equally compelling and deeply human. A map is not a story. Knowing the outline of a villa is not the same as standing in its courtyard, holding a tool last touched by a Roman carpenter, or gazing at the intact mosaic that adorned its floor. Full excavation transforms whispers into shouts. It provides definitive answers to our burning questions. Was this a fort or a factory? The ditches would tell us. Who lived here? Their graves would introduce us. The physical reality of reconstructed walls and displayed artifacts has an irreplaceable power to educate and inspire. It makes history tangible, pulling it from the realm of theory into the light of day. It could transform the village, bringing sustainable tourism, creating jobs, and forging a new, proud identity rooted in its incredible past. School children could walk on real Roman roads, and the entire community could share in the pride of unveiling a national treasure. The knowledge gained could fill textbooks, rewrite chapters on Roman Britain, and give a voice to the countless ordinary people who lived, worked, and died there. To leave it all buried feels, to some, like a profound silence, a story forever untold. The decision is never made in an academic vacuum. It falls to heritage bodies, local planning committees, and most importantly, the people who live above the secret. Their voices are paramount. Would they welcome years of disruption for a lasting legacy? Would they prefer the quiet mystery, the knowledge that their homes are guardians of an unseen world? Some residents might cherish the privacy and character of their village just as it is. Others might dream of a world-class museum and research center on their doorstep. This is where you, the viewer, become part of the conversation. If this were your village, what would you choose? Is the potential for profound knowledge worth the permanent alteration of a landscape and the final destruction of the site itself? Or is the greatest respect we can pay to this hidden history to protect it, to let it keep its secrets a while longer, trusting that future generations will be wiser stewards with sharper eyes? The fate of Britain's best-kept Roman secret hangs in this delicate, difficult balance between our desire to know and our duty to preserve. The village we have been exploring is not a fictional place. Its real name is Vindamora, a name that whispers of its ancient past, located in County Durham, nestled in the valley of the river where modern-day Ebchester is built directly over its forgotten remains. The name Vindamora itself is Celtic in origin, likely meaning white fort or fair ridge, a description that would have perfectly fit the strategic high ground chosen by the Romans. For centuries, Ebchester was simply a quiet village known for its medieval church and its peaceful setting. But the gradual unveiling of the Roman secret beneath its streets has begun to rewrite its entire story. The ghostly fort, the sprawling vicus, the grand villa estate, they are not just academic concepts here. They are a rediscovered heritage, and they are changing how the community sees itself. Local history groups, once small gatherings of enthusiasts, have seen their membership swell. They now organize guided walks, not just to the obvious church with its Roman stones, but to the fields where the crop marks appear in drought years, pointing out where the bathhouse once stood or where the main gate of the fort would have been. There is talk of a permanent heritage trail with discrete information panels that would allow a visitor to walk through the modern village while seeing the transparent overlay of the Roman one, connecting the present to the past in a tangible, educational way. This is not just about tourism, though that is a hopeful benefit. It is about a profound shift in identity. Schoolchildren in Ebchester now learn that their home was once a bustling node on the empire's frontier, a place of soldiers, traders, and craftsmen. The discovery has fostered a new, deep-seated pride, a sense that their village is not just a dot on a map, but a keeper of a significant national story. The secret is no longer hidden. It is becoming the village's most compelling narrative, a source of cohesion that brings people together to celebrate and protect a legacy they never knew they had. For visitors, it offers a rare and intimate glimpse into the layered history of Britain, where the grand sweep of empire can be traced in the soil of a single, quiet community. The mystery has been solved only to reveal a richer, more engaging truth that history is not just about the past, but about how we choose to remember it and build upon it together. From a sleepy village of thatched cottages and cricket greens, we have followed a trail of whispers all the way to the edge of a revelation. We have seen how a single plow strike revealed a panicked fortune, how aerial photographs sketched a ghost town in the wheat, and how ground-penetrating radar gave walls and roads to a lost world. This journey has shown us that the secret beneath the soil is so much more than scattered stones and tarnished coins. It is an entire lost chapter of British history, a vibrant narrative of cultural collision and slow assimilation. It is the story of a native landscape meeting an imperial blueprint, of Iron Age trackways becoming Roman roads, and of local chieftains transforming into Roman gentlemen. It is a testament to human innovation, from the clever engineering of underfloor heating to the roaring industry of the tile kiln that roofed a community. Most of all, it is the story of daily life, the soldier polishing his belt buckle, the potter firing a batch of jars, the villa owner walking his courtyard, the mother burying her family's wealth in a time of fear. These individual lives woven together form the fabric of a province. What Ebchester and places like it teach us is that history is not a flat page in a textbook. It is a living, breathing, layered thing. Great civilizations do not simply vanish. They sink, they transform, they are scavenged and repurposed. Their stones become our churches, their roads dictate our hedgerows, and their stories linger in our local legends. The most extraordinary secrets are not always in grand pyramids or lost cities. Sometimes they are waiting in the most ordinary of places, under a village green or at the end of a country lane, patiently sleeping until the moment we learn how to see them again. What hidden history might be lying beneath your own feet? Share your local mysteries in the comments below, and subscribe to join us as we uncover more stories written in the landscape.